ahead. I just started the recording. If we have not met, my name's Brianne Bales. I'm the manager for the Homeless Contribution Income Tax Credit. We also have Lonnie Silva on the call. You've probably interacted with Lonnie already. She's doing great in assisting folks with contributions and tax certificate questions and concerns. Um, so yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. If you can, please put your name and organization name in the chat, especially if we have questions come in. This helps us with follow-up conversations. Some of you I am familiar with, but others may be newer. So please go ahead and put your name and organization name in the chat. Just have some reminders for the tax year that we just wrapped up, reminders about contributions and certificates. Some of it is kind of basics, but a lot of these reminders are questions that we get in um, from you all and from donors. So I wanted to cover some of um, those basics today. So some timeline reminders. The last day to submit and approve contributions for 2024 is January 31st. So be sure you have a couple more weeks to get those in. Go ahead and make sure you're getting those in before the deadline. This does include the donor submissions. And so I want to point this out because um, donors who maybe they submit something towards the end of January, that does need to be approved by you if you're using that donor submission form. And it needs to be approved by you by the 31st. This is really important for the certificates being produced. So as you can see on the slide, February 1st is when those quarter four and annual certificates are available if you are on the quarterly or annual timeline for your organization. And so very important to make sure that you're on top of that because there's basically some code that runs in the background within Salesforce, and it transfers all those contributions that are pending, and it approves them and adds them to the certificate. And so wanting to make sure we hit that before that happens. If you are on the immediate certificate timeline, you submit a contribution and the certificate populates right away, that doesn't apply to you as far as February 1st isn't as big of a date as far as the certificates go. The deadline for nonprofits for you all to send out the certificates is um, February 15th. We want everyone to have those when they're filing their taxes. And then last week, we had a training about the annual report submission. And so just a reminder that that is going to be due on March 1st. All of the email instructions have been sent out to your organizations. If you did not get an email with those instructions, it includes your project name um, and project categories, let us know. But those should have been sent to you already. Some notes about contributions. So just to be clear, it is your responsibility as a nonprofit to submit or approve contributions that qualify for HCTC. And so we at DOLA do not actually send those certificates to the donors. We do not manually approve those contributions. That is you as the nonprofit, that's your role within this process. You can go to the contributions tab to submit a contribution from a brand new, donation that came through. And you'll have until January 31st to submit those 2024 contributions. And so I'll show you, I can show you what that looks like if you need that assistance. We can walk through that on as a part of this office hours. Happy to do that. Just another note, certificates will not be produced for those donor contributions unless you approve them before January 31st. So as I was mentioning on the previous slide, you'll want to make sure you actually review and approve it so the donor can get a certificate for their contributions. So yeah, just January 31st, very, very important date. After that date, their accountant tells them about it or something, they ask for the tax credit. You can use that late form to submit the contributions after January 31st for the previous tax year. Any questions about contributions? Please walk us through how to approve submission. Sure, yes, I can do that. And then someone else is saying that they thought Salesforce automatically sends their certificate. No, that's not the case. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you're able to get a visual of what this looks like on your end to be able to complete these tasks. So we had a question, if we are improved in late 2024, what we had donations, do we need to do the annual report? So the annual report is only for active organizations that participated in 2024. Karen, your organization was approved to begin in January 1st, 2025. So your first tax year that you'll report on is this current tax year, 2025. And then Brenda asked if they could wait until February 15th to submit all of their 2024 HCTC contributions. After January 31st, you'll want to use this late contribution form for that. So I'll go ahead and start from the beginning, and then we'll talk about the late contribution form. Contributions here, you'll want to come here, submit new contribution for, right now it's open for 2024 and 2025. Tax certificates here is where you'll actually send the tax certificates. And so this pending to deliver list is kind of like your to-do list for sending out those certificates. They're not automatically sent out. So you'll need to click on each tax credit and select send in order to email it to the donor. This donor does not have an email on file, and so it's your responsibility to print the tax credit certificate and mail it to the donor. The purpose of this button here, the send button here, is just to confirm that you delivered it. It's kind of like a checklist feature for you within the tax certificate. So if it's pending to deliver, that means it's still on your to-do list to get those out before February 15th. If you are on an annual or quarterly timeline, you may not have any certificates here because, as I mentioned a minute ago, those are going to be produced on February 1st. The system automatically does that. Contributions, like I said, this is where you would go to submit a new contribution. If you are using the donor submission form, you go to draft contributions to review those. So you'll just click on the contribution, click, well, review it and make sure it looks good, it looks accurate. If it does not look accurate, like maybe you don't even know this donor or the donor put, you know, incorrectly put the wrong project, for example, or something like that, you could decline it and give the reason for decline here. And then the donor does get an email that it was declined. with your note that you included. If it looks good, you can go through the approval process here by clicking approve. This one's not going to let me because I just declined it. Um, but that's how you would go through your draft contributions. You need to make sure this list is empty so that you go through and make sure you review all of the drafts that have been submitted by your donors if you're using the donor submission form. So I think that covers those questions in the chat. Are the ones we personally submit already approved? So if you are on the immediate certificate frequency, where it's just a one-to-one, each contribution has a certificate, then yes, it's approved. That's what my example here, this test account is. If you are on the annual time frame, for example, and your certificates are going to be produced on February 1st, these statuses will all say pending, I believe. So, so yeah, if it says pending and you don't have any certificates yet, that's the reason. Don't be alarmed. There's a question on when the certificates are sent through the system, who does the email come from so the donor can be sure to be on the lookout. I believe it is the DOLA HCTC email. So let me see here. Lonnie, do you know off the top of your head if that's correct? So it looks like the name of the sender is DOLA HCTC program. I can add this to my screen share really quick. So this is what the contribution decline email looks like that I just declined that test example. And so it looks like it's from DOLA HCTC program. And then the email address is our general email inbox for HCTC. And this is the same for the certificate emails as well. So when you send a certificate to the donor and the link to access the certificate, that is included same from the same. For the question on the draft contributions to approve, do you need me to, would it be helpful for me to walk through the full approval for that contribution? So I'm gonna pretend to approve this one then. Happy to do that. So you do need to assign the tax year. So if it's a donation that was submitted last year and you're going through and approving it, just make sure you pay attention to which year you're selecting. Note if it's through an intermediary organization or not. So note this is a donor submission. They may or may not know what an intermediary organization is, but this is a good cue for you to double check. Okay, did this come through Colorado Gives or United Way to make sure that this is being entered correctly? I'm just going to select no for that. And then this is the donor lookup feature. And so this is to make sure that the donor is not being duplicated within the system. So this is going to search for the donor. If it found someone with the same last name and tax ID, then they would pop up. I'm going to include one that's brand new just so that we can go through the donor information process. So you'll confirm the information that they submitted. So they selected all this information when they filled out the form themselves. You'll want to select individual household. their name, make sure that all looks good, confirm the tax ID type, address, and then email and phone number are optional. And then the summary page just goes, is a summary of all the information that you're approving related to this contribution. So if it all looks good, it all looks accurate, then you just select submit. It's going to change its status within the system. I'm on the immediate time frame, so it's going to show approved. The decision of me approving it is recorded here. And then at this time, because I'm on the immediate time frame for my tax credit certificates, then this one that I just approved just now is now in the certificates portion. It's ready and available to be sent. So it would be, you do have to actually take the initiative to send that either via email or by mail to the donor. Any questions on the contributions process? So there's a question on how do you edit if the email address is wrong for the donor or something of that nature. That is something that we on the admin side will have to do. So if you um, email us, Lonnie or I can make that change. Just please, when you're doing that, make sure you include the certificate number or contribution number that you're referring to so that we know um, whose information to update in the system. And that way it makes it easier for avoiding sending personal information over unencrypted email. You can just send us that contribution number and we're happy to edit that on the back end. And yes, so Caitlin noted that you can edit their amount and donation date within that contribution. And that's correct. But if it's a contribution that's already been submitted and you notice there was an error regarding the donor's contact information or something like that, we do have to edit the contact record. And so please email us for those changes. Any other questions on contributions? Oh, I didn't show you the late form. So after January 31st, please use the late contribution form. This is very similar to the form that's on the contributions page. It's just a one-to-one option where basically when you submit the late contribution form, it's going to produce a certificate right away as well. So that is accessed on the home screen of the Salesforce platform. Okay, I'm gonna go on to tax credit information if that works for you. No other questions right now. So some notes about donor data. So we did just have a question in the chat about how to update that data. Just make sure that you're following our formatting and style guide that's linked on our website. This is important to make sure that information is correct and accurate. For example, ensuring that tax IDs are correct. Sometimes we have folks that are entered for their spouse's tax ID. So maybe the tax ID that was submitted doesn't match the name of the donor. So maybe the husband is the name on the donation, but it's the wife's tax ID that's associated with that. That's not accurate. We do need to make sure that those are accurate and correct because the Department of Revenue does use that information to double check people's identity. Please make sure you're looking at name spellings and making sure it matches what is on their tax information. Another note that contributions over $5,000 or $5,001 or more must have the appropriate backup attachments, and contributions through intermediary organizations like Colorado Gives should be tracked in Salesforce. So as I was showing you on that form, there's the option to select if that gift was through an intermediary organizations. Please note that IRA distributions are eligible for HCTC. So yes, they are eligible, but they're not considered through an intermediary organization. An intermediary organization is a nonprofit that just kind of acts like as a payment processor, collects the donations on your behalf and passes them to you. An IRA distribution is directly from the donor, so just making that note for the intermediary piece. We do have a couple more questions in the chat. Did you say that if a donation is submitted late, the certificate would be immediately available? That's correct, yes. Is there any discussion on your side is when you create a draft that you can access it later and add the rest of the information? It would be helpful. That's something that I could bring to our IT department and see if if that is a possibility or not. Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't looked into that, Brenda. So yeah, we'll make a note to look into that. Going over to some tax credit reminders. It is the nonprofit's responsibility to send tax credit certificates to the donors, as we already talked about. DOLA does not issue the tax credits, and this is by statute. The roles that are set up in the law, basically the nonprofit is the entity that issues the certificate. So that's why we have it set up so that you just submit hit the send button to issue that to the donor. If the donor has trouble accessing information, double check their information on file. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, sometimes the tax ID is entered incorrectly or their name is misspelled. And when the donor tries to access their certificate, um, it's not matching up in the system, so it's denying their access to that. And so just wanting to flag, not only just being careful when you're submitting and approving the information, but if donors come to you and say, we can't access this, that's one thing to check, is to make sure that their information is accurate. Please, please, please familiarize yourself with your organization's certificate frequency. This is going to help your donors when they're trying to figure out when they're going to get their certificates, and it's going to help you know when those certificates are going to be available on the website for you to be able to send those. This is, distinct for every organization. And so if you do not know your certificate frequency, we're happy to share that information with you. You can also find it on the Salesforce website. I believe it's under applications if you go to your approved application, and not under applications, it's under projects. If you go to your approved project and it is, I am proving myself wrong here. I thought it was included here. Maybe it's just on the admin side where we're able to view it. Oh, here it is. Certificate frequency, it is under the application portion. So you are able to check your certificate frequency for your organization there. Please note that donors never need a login to access their certificates. This is actually something that we've been seeing in our inbox. Quite a few donors are emailing us saying that they need their login to get their tax credit certificate. This is never the case. We're trying to find out where they're getting this information or why they're a little confused about that. If you have an idea, um, please let us know. Because all of the information that HCTC has produced for taxpayers specifically does not include that they need a login. So I don't know if it's something they are assuming because it's a website, or if they're looking at the information that is meant for you all and setting up the Salesforce accounts. Not really sure, but just note for your for your information, donors never need a login to access their certificates. We are also just trying to remind everyone that donors need to file electronically um, for the best case of their tax credit certificates being verified and approved by the Department of Revenue. So we learned that if someone files by paper and they have more than one certificate, then they're not really able to include more than one certificate number on the paper tax filing paperwork. And so it's highly, highly recommended. I would even use the word required to file electronically. If someone does choose to file by paper, then they risk their tax credit being denied by the Department of Revenue. And so just wanting to note that for everyone as your donors start completing that process this spring. There is a question about, can we email you to change our frequency? The answer for that is probably no, unfortunately, because the way that our Salesforce system is built, there's a lot of flows, there's a lot of code in the background that basically catches all of the contributions and it puts them on a certificate according to the frequency. And so when that frequency is changed, then some contributions might be lost. And if you already have some that are submitted, then there's not really a way to manually create certificates for them. And so unfortunately, that is locked in for the 4 years of your approval with HCTC. Um, if you do apply for reapproval in your 4th year of participation, then you can change your frequency at that time um, if that's something you're interested in. Has any communication gone out to existing donors about the electronic filing requirement? That seems like it might be a big issue for some donors. There's not, there hasn't been any official communication that I'm aware of. Um, that's a good question. I think that's something that with your donor specifically, you could remind them of. Um, and if that's something that would be helpful for us to create some kind of communication piece or document from DOLA, we could look into that. Um, I'm not sure if you think that would be helpful or if you could just create that within your organization. It's just simply that they're required to file electronically. So, um, yeah. So if that's something that would be helpful for us to create, I'm happy to do that. But yeah, just wanting to make sure that you're aware in case donors need to be aware of that. So when nonprofit says that they have the information on their website for their donors to see that. So that's a really good idea. And they have a flyer for HCTC. So awesome. So that's all of the tax credit reminders I have. Are there any other questions? All right, just a couple reminders about Salesforce. Use the late form after January 31st for 2024 entries. Note that Google Chrome is the best browser to use for Salesforce. So if you have errors that come up, like your form just is not working at all or something weird like that, just make sure you're using Google Chrome. That's kind of our first line of defense if someone emails us and says it's not working. Um, the other browsers don't really play well with Salesforce, so just try to always use Google Chrome. If you do ever run across an error or issue, just please email us and send us a screenshot of whatever occurred. That really helps us in trying to nail down actually what happened. Participation requirements. So we really want organizations to actually utilize HCTC. Some of you have been, really active so far um, within HCTC, and this is, this is working for you. I think others that may be newer, just wanting to help you grow in your utilization of HCTC. And just a reminder that the minimum for participation is logging at least $5,000 in contributions for 2024 or at least 5 donors for 2024. So these are just a couple of reminders for that. Please note that we're going to have orientation next week. So this orientation is for organizations that are either new to HCTC or new staff. Maybe you have someone who's new to your organization is going to be working with HCTC. This orientation is going to be very helpful for them to get onboarded. So we do have orientations kind of staggered throughout the year, but we will have one next week on January 21st. Please email us if you want an invitation to that. We're also going to have office hours in February. I haven't sent that invitation out yet, so that's why I highlighted it, but we will, Lonnie put it in the chat. Yeah, thank you. I will be sending out that calendar invitation soon, just so that we can check in again, kind of like today, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure all questions are answered. But overall, really excited about how 2024 rounded out. We've had a lot of um, positive usage of the tax credit and just excited about the new organizations that are going to be on board for us with this year. So far for 2024, we've had over 6,000 donations logged and over 19 million in contributions. And I know some of you are still submitting for 2024. So looking forward to that number going up and continued, active uses for your donors, donating more to ultimately make homelessness rare and brief in your community. So really appreciate your commitment to HCTC. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. That's the end of our prepared notes for today.